My guest today is the 45th governor of Arkansas, Mickey Dale Beebe, a.k.a. Governor Beebe. Born in a tar paper house in Amagon, Arkansas, Governor Beebe exceeded his poor socioeconomic birthplace to attend Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, make partner to a law firm in Searcy, Arkansas, and in 1982 began his political career as Arkansas State Senator that would eventually springboard him to the governor's mansion. In the 20 years Councilor Beebe served as an Arkansas State Senator, he interestingly never faced an opponent in his 2-decade career. Because of term limiting, in 2002, Beebe left the Senate and was elected Arkansas Attorney General, again with no opponent. He served 4 years in that position. In 2007, Mr. Mike Beebe became Governor Beebe of Arkansas and served 2 full terms. In those 8 years, he reduced the grocery tax, navigated his citizens through the 2009 recession, and enacted the Affordable Health Care Act. Governor Mike Beebe is said to be one of, if not the most, popular governor in Arkansas history, known for his honesty, loyalty, and no-nonsense approach to solving problems and for working across the aisle. He says, and I quote, "You can get a lot done if you don't care who gets the credit." This leadership style has served him well, making him an effective legislator, deal maker, and endeared him to the voters and his comrades of both political parties. It is with great pleasure that I welcome to the table the hardworking, popular, pragmatic, retired governor of Arkansas, Mr. Mike Beebe.
That's a heck of an introduction.
Isn't it, though? And all true. Every bit of it is true. Well,
I've been blessed. People have been very good to me.
You're very humble. You always give the credit away. That's what I said right in the beginning of the show, didn't I? I love your Southern name.
I heard Lee Scott, who was a former CEO of Walmart, heck of a guy, really, really great leader, give a speech one time about leadership. And one of the tenets that I remember the most was what you just said, and that is give away all the credit and accept all the blame. And ultimately, it's not as magnanimous as it sounds, because when you give all the credit away to the others, people still know you deserve credit. So it's not as generous as it sounds. But what it does is it creates loyalty, causes those other folks to work even harder. And when you accept the blame, then the buck stops with you. You can privately blame folks, but publicly, as a leader, you accept it. So Lee Scott did a great job in that speech, and it's a lesson all of us that aspire to leadership need to know.
That's exactly right. I love your Southern name, Mickey Dale Beebe. Did your mother?
Not many people know that. I'm sorry you keep publicizing it.
Did your mother call you Mickey Dale?
Call me Mickey until probably I was in the 6th grade. And then everybody started saying Mike, except my grandmother. She never switched.
Well, I like it. You were born in Amagon, Arkansas. I'm not even sure where that is. You moved a lot. Tell us about your moving. And before you do, I just want to tell the listeners that out of the state of Arkansas, you lived in Detroit, St. Louis, Chicago, Houston, Alamogordo, New Mexico, and in the state of Arkansas, you lived in Tuckerman, Jonesboro, Little Rock, and Newport, where you graduated high school. Those are the only ones I know. Tell us about moving all the time.
Well, first of all, I wasn't born in Amagon.
Oh, you weren't?
I was born in the suburb of Amagon.
Oh, gosh.
Amagon has 85 people, and they tell me, in fact, I had a distant cousin that cited where the old shack used to be. It's now a rice field. But it's about a half a mile north of Amagon, which is only about 8 or 10 buildings. So I always say I was born in the suburb of Amagon because it's out in the country. But no, and my mother had me as a teenager. She didn't finish high school. She was limited in what she could do with lack of education. She had a great personality and a great work ethic. And so she spent her whole life as a waitress. And I was her only child. And we moved around a lot. As you said, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, Festus, Missouri, Crystal City, 3 places in Florida, Houston, Texas, Alamogordo, New Mexico, Tuckerman, Newport, and then from the ninth grade on, we came back from, we were in Port Walton Beach, Florida, and came back to Newport. Northeast Arkansas obviously was her home. And, so we came back to Newport. So I went all through high school, stayed 4 years in Newport going through high school. It's the longest I'd ever stayed anywhere. And then, after graduating from high school, went to ASU. After graduating from ASU, went to Fayetteville Law School, and then came to Searcy straight out of law school, joining a firm here that I was pretty lucky because the three senior folks that were there when I joined all ended up, one retired about 6 years later. The other two were elected judges, and I woke up one morning with a senior partner in a well-established Searcy law firm that a lot of luck there.
You were only there 2 years when that happened, right?
No, I was there 2 years when they made me a partner, but it was 6 years when the two judges got elected, and a couple of years after that when the senior partner retired. So
you went to ASU. Did you?
Mm-hmm.
I heard you say or read somewhere that you considered a career in the FBI.
Yeah, I've got several friends who always map out and say that they remember I said I was going to be governor. The truth of the matter is I went to law school specifically to go in the FBI. Back then, there were only two routes into the FBI. One was an accounting degree, and I knew that wasn't for me, and the other was a law degree. And so law school was a prerequisite. And when I went to law school, that was my intention, was to go to the FBI. Obviously, your values change as you mature, and throughout the course of the first year of law school, I started to question what I wanted to do, and ultimately decided to go into the practice of law, and that's what happened. So
you took up practice in Searcy. Why did you pick Searcy? Is that just the place you got a job, or did you just love the town?
Well, it was a little bit of both. When I graduated, there weren't a lot of jobs. We had about 80 people, 75 or 80 people, I think, in the graduating class, which was about normal back then for the law school in Fayetteville. And there weren't a lot of jobs. I was editor of the Law Review, so I did have some options. I had 3 opportunities, and one of them was Searcy, and I had clerked here in the summer between my first and second year of law school, and with the very firm that I ended up joining. And so that was a determinative factor. It wasn't the salary. The salary that I was offered in Searcy was the worst of the 3 offers that I had. But senior partner said, boy, if you're as good as you think you are, you'll be a partner here before you would be anyplace else. You can be a big fish in a little pond. And if you're not as good as you think you are, you don't deserve to be a partner anywhere.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm
so
sorry.
It all worked out. It all worked out.
Yeah, big fish in a little pond. You talked about this freely, so I don't feel like I'm asking out of turn, but your mother married 5 times, which is why you moved a lot. Yeah. She was a great person in every aspect of her life except her judgment of men. And so I never knew my dad. I never had a dad, really. I heard who he was, but I never met him. And he was never there. And so I had a number of stepdads, some better than others, some worse than others. But yeah, that was that precipitated most of those moves. How did all that moving develop your personality, you think? Well, I've always joked that if you're the new kid in class every few months, you better be good at one of 3 things. Either you better be tough, and I wasn't. You better be able to run fast, and I couldn't. Well, you better learn how to talk. So I suppose I learned how to talk. I suppose that helped develop my personality. Well, this is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with the ever-popular 45th retired Governor Mike Beebe. We'll talk about his 30-year political career, hear some more sage wisdom that he learned while governing, and get some behind-the-scenes stories of Arkansas politics. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. Over 40 years ago, with only $400, Kerry founded Arkansas Flag and Banner. During the last 4 decades, the business has grown and changed, along with Kerry's experience and leadership knowledge. In 1995, she launched the business website flagandbanner.com, became an early blogger in 2004, founded the nonprofit Friends of Dreamland Ballroom in 2009, began distributing a biannual publication called Brave Magazine in 2014, and today she's branched out into this very radio show, YouTube channel, and podcasts, where each week you'll hear her engage in candid conversations with engaging persons. Stay informed about upcoming guests by subscribing to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy's YouTube channel. For updates of happenings on the busy Flag and Banner campus, like Dreamland Ballroom events, current Up in Your Business guests, sales at flagandbanner.com, relevant Brave magazine articles, and Kerry's weekly blog post, join our email list at flagandbanner.com and receive our Thursday, very popular, all-inclusive water cooler weekly update. Telling American-made stories, selling American-made flags. Flagandbanner.com. Back to you, Kerry.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Arkansas's popular and pragmatic retired 45th Governor Mike Beebe. Before the break, we talked about Governor Beebe's humble beginnings. We talked about his wonderful personality and how it came from having to be so versatile and why everybody likes him, because he had to be liked at every school he ever went to. And that's why he's the most popular guy. Governor Beebe, you now have a successful career as an attorney and partner in the Lytle Beebe law firm in Searcy, Arkansas that we just talked about before the break. It was 1982, and you decided to run for the Arkansas State Senate. Why would you make that change?
Well, I'd always been interested in politics after I got out of law school and after I had changed my course in life. We had a senior partner, Ed Lytle, who had been a state senator for 8 years and had decided that he was 8 years was all he wanted, so he retired after 8 years. That was unusual at the time. And that had been several years before. And so he piqued my interest a little bit. Then for reasons nobody ever understood, back in 1974, when I was 2 years out of law school, I didn't have any money, didn't know anything about politics, but I campaigned for, and out of the clear blue, Dale Bumpers appointed me to the ASU board. I was just a baby, and I looked even younger. I used to have to wear glasses with no prescription once in a while, so people would think I was older. They thought I was a student. And so my 5 years on the ASU board further triggered my interest in politics and government and public policy. And so I was searching around for opportunity, and redistricting occurred in 82. We had been in with Bill Walmsley as our senator from Batesville, but Searcy had grown so much. In redistricting, Walmsley wanted shed of Searcy because he kept getting an opponent out of Searcy. He kept winning, but he kept getting an opponent. So they created, in redistricting, a district that threw Searcy in with Stuttgart and DeWitt, had a incumbent named Mr. Bill Hargrove. And so I decided to run. And so I started running in 81, like in July of 81. And when it came filing time in 82, he came to see me, wanted me not to run against him. Said he probably only wanted 4 more years. He was a nice gentleman. I said, Mr. Bill, I'm going to run. And a few weeks later, he dropped out. Actually, he never filed. So when the filing time came, I filed, and I was the only one, and the rest is kind of history.
Why did he ask you not to run? Did he think you'd beat him? You were a brand new guy.
Yeah, but Searcy was bigger than Stuttgart and growing. And so geographically, the district had, in terms of hometown folks, favored me, even though I was brand new, young, and inexperienced. And I suppose that was a factor. I'm not sure, but
well, it sounds like he was about ready to retire anyway.
Well, perhaps.
You remarkably served unopposed for 20 years. Did this garnish you a nickname?
Well, not that I know of, unless it's lucky. you have to be a little bit lucky for something like that to happen. But, I campaigned every day. I never had an opponent, but, I always thought that, you don't just campaign during campaign season. Now, it wasn't a formal and official campaign. We weren't raising money or any of that stuff, but I was out in the district, I had a law practice that had evolved where I was the senior partner, and I had big cases. So I didn't have lots of cases, but the cases I had were pretty huge. It afforded me extra time. And so I spent several hours a week traveling in the district, seeing people, listening to their concerns, trying to be responsive, doing constituent services. And, that paid off. And so as time went on, that grew and grew, and consequently, nobody ever decided to run. Then when I got ready to run for Attorney General, there was, I think, 7 people, counting myself, on both sides of the aisle, talking about running for AG. Ultimately, nobody ever filed except me. And so I was elected AG without an opponent, which I don't think has ever happened, or if it has, I don't remember it. But in any event, when I ran for governor, some of the political pundits, particularly John Brummett, said I didn't know how to campaign, never had a campaign, didn't know how to raise money, didn't know how to debate.
Except for you campaigned every day, 365 days a year, which it sounds like your opponents just didn't want to work that hard.
Well, I enjoyed it. So it wasn't much work. I like people, and I enjoyed the Senate. I never thought I'd enjoy anything more than the Senate. Yeah,
you were term limited. During your 20 years, they enacted term limits, and so you were kind of forced to quit politics or run for another office.
Right. Either had to get in. State Senate was as high as you could go and still be part-time. So you could have a real job and a real life outside of politics. So I had to make a decision with term limits to get in or get out. There was no other place to go. And so obviously I decided to, quit the law practice and get in full-time to, elected office.
Well, you had to take a cut in pay.
Oh yeah, no question about it. But I've been fortunate, I'd had a number of good cases, including had the largest jury verdict in the history of Arkansas in 81 before I ran, and then subsequently, in 4 or 5 years later, I had one that even broke that record. I called my wife after that case and I said, I got good news and bad news. She said, well, what's the bad news? I said, my record's broken. She said, what's the good news? I said, I broke it. So yeah, I had a cut in pay when I was AG, in 2003. But I had been fortunate that I'd made enough money that it didn't really change our lifestyle.
So when you win a big case like that for the state, you don't get any of that money, do you? Or do you get some bonuses for having won such a big case like a normal lawyer would?
No, those cases that I was referring to were not for the state. That was my private law practice. Because as a senator, I could have a private practice. As a senator was part-time.
Oh,
so
I see.
All that occurred before I was AG. But you're right. You win cases as AG, all that money goes to the state.
Was the Chicken House case your law practice, or was that for the state?
No, that was mine. That was the first one. That was the first.
What was the second one called, or did it have a name?
Well, we didn't call the first one Chicken House case, but the print media ended up calling it that. But the second one was a terrible accident involving 14-year-old junior high cheerleader and her grandmother that was just atrocious in a big truck. So, one was a products case, and one was a negligence case.
What was motivating you to stay in politics instead of going back into private practice in Searcy after your Senate?
Well, I'd done all I needed to do in the practice of law, and I really enjoyed the public service and the politics of it. And so what motivated me, I suppose, was a different challenge. I'd practiced law for 30 years. 20 of those years I was in the Senate. But as I said, that's a part-time job, so I could have a real job. So I continued in the practice of law for 30 years. I've been there, done that, and decided to do something different.
Well, I certainly understand that. Tell us how the decision to run for the governor came about. You ran against Asa Hutchinson, and during a debate had a pretty defining moment when you said, "I want to promise less and deliver more to the Arkansas people."
Yeah, what I suppose prompted it was an open seat. Huckabee was term limited, and so he was gone, and so it was an opportunity, and it's a natural progression. A lot of AGs run for and get elected governor. I'd had a statewide constituency and base from the time that I was AG, and name recognition had gone up significantly. So I thought I had a chance. And in the course of it, through my 20 years in the Senate, I'd found that telling people the truth actually was not just good public policy. It was really good politics too. Even though you made some people mad, and even though you told them stuff they didn't want to hear, the majority of them, not all of them, but the majority of them actually rewarded you for being honest. And so it was kind of a mantra with me that I just told it like it was, and ultimately that was good politics as well as good government. And so it was a natural thing to say when people started pandering about what all they were going to do, for me to say, look, I'd rather under promise and over deliver rather than go the other way around. I think people reward you for it. And ultimately that's what happened.
Not long after you were elected in 2008, the banking crisis occurred. What did you think? Oh my gosh, just my luck.
Yeah, well, you didn't have much time to think about it. I had a good year in 2007, because I was elected in 2006 and took office in 2007, and we were doing quite well. We actually had a surplus, and we were able to do things that got us out of, or headed down the road to get us out of court from all the school stuff that we dealt with for 20-something years, that I dealt with in the Senate. And we were able to fund public schools and facilities in a way that headed us away from court and back into local folks being able to run schools. And as a result of that, I was pretty happy. And as you mentioned, bam, in 2008, the big Wall Street banks torpedoed, and it torpedoed the country into a recession that lasted all through 2008 and into parts of 2009. And but I was proud of the fact that with I'd been in the Senate, I'd been on budget, I knew how revenue stabilization was supposed to work. I knew what conservative. I'm a social liberal and a fiscal conservative. I don't care what your religion is or what church you go to or who you like or who you don't like. But I don't want you spending money that's not there, and I don't want you wasting my money or anybody else's money. And so we were conservative in our budgeting, and we were able to cut with the Revenue Stabilization Act and periodically as it went through, so that we were one of 4 states that never really got in trouble fiscally throughout the recession. And the other 3 states didn't have any people. So they had more animals, like North Dakota, Montana, and Alaska. So we were fortunate that we got through that crisis with a minimum of problems. We didn't go into debt like a lot of states did. We didn't steal from retirement funds just to make the budget work. So it was tough, and there was some pain throughout it. But when we came out of it, much better than the rest of the country.
What do you think about the recession we're in now? Do you think about what you would do different than what's going on, than how it's being handled?
I have great sympathy. I told Asa that I know how lonely it is where he sits in the middle of a crisis. I didn't have a pandemic. I had lots of floods and ice storms and tornadoes. But a pandemic's even worse, it seems to me. And so I told him it was lonesome when you're having to make those decisions as a governor during a crisis. And if you ever just needed to talk, I was here. And so we've developed, notwithstanding the fact we ran against each other in 2006, we've developed a pretty good relationship.
You were really known for, excuse me, you were really known for balancing the budget. it was really important to you. Like you said, you're a social liberal and a fiscal conservative. When the Forestry Commission fell short, you audited them in your second term.
Yeah, we ended up making some changes. You're always going to have problems. You can't keep your finger on, state government's too big. You can't keep your finger on everything in advance all the time. And sometimes some of these things reach up and bite you. And all you can do in circumstances when those things occur is to take decisive action to eradicate the problem, to fix the problem. And so that was just one example. We had a number of examples, most of which I've forgotten, but a number of examples where, you have ups and downs and you have problems in the agencies and you have to react decisively. And so that was an example of one that ultimately worked out. Back
to current events, you were also really, really a proponent of schools and really cleaning up the school system. Your mother was big on education because, like you said, she didn't graduate high school and she felt limited. What do you think about the STEM schools, or do you have an opinion about STEM schools and the way they're rearranging the public school system in Little Rock?
You talking about charter schools?
Charter schools,
Yeah. I have always been opposed to private or charter schools that weren't open enrollment getting state funds. That's a different matter. But I've always been supportive of open enrollment public charter schools. And there's a difference. An open enrollment school is usually one where any of the public school students, regardless of their financial ability, have the opportunity to go to that charter school. And in cases where they have a limited number, then they do it by lottery. Which is also fair, so that you're not just taking rich kids. You're getting every kid has the opportunity to be able to at least have a chance to go to the open enrollment public charter schools, and them getting state money is something that I'm supportive of.
Why is everybody against it?
As long as, and I was clear about this, you can't have an open enrollment public charter school in a district that so adversely impacts the student population of the public school in that district that it ruins the public school.
I think that is what's happening. Is that what the problem is now? It seems to be. Well, they're closing the small neighborhood schools.
Well, it can be a problem. In Little Rock, I don't know that it's gotten to that point yet because they do have a significant population that is able to feed. But let me explain. This gets a little technical, so I don't want to get too deep into it.
That's all right.
Under the Supreme Court orders and the way they forced us to fund public schools in a different fashion, you have to have a certain number of kids because we're paying by the kid, or else you can't have the curriculum necessary.
Yeah, you can't keep the light bill on.
Yeah, or you can't have chemistry or physics or some of those harder to find teachers if you don't have enough students. So if you have a small town or a small school district and somebody opens an open enrollment public charter school, you can actually take enough kids away from the regular public school that they can't function. And so you can't allow that. Those kind of open enrollment public charter schools cannot be permitted. Now, that's all different from private schools.
Right.
Private schools, they don't get state money, and if somebody wants to go to a private school, that's a different measure. The state can impose requirements on those private schools in terms of curricular requirements and stuff like that, but they're not funding them. So what we're talking about is the public charter schools.
Before we go to break, you're known for cutting the middle class taxes. You reduced the state's grocery tax by half. You increased the homestead property tax. Your education reform was really important to you. You did a lot for special needs students, expanded Medicaid. Anything about those that you're really proud of that you want to mention?
Yeah, but I got to correct you on one thing. I eliminated the grocery tax.
Oh, eliminated?
We cut it in half. We cut it in half the first year. Then we chipped away at it. And when my last year in office, we still had 1 7/8. Now there's 1/8 that we couldn't take off because it was part of what was passed by the people in the constitutional amendment for all that game and fish stuff and everything else. And so that 1/8 we couldn't do anything about. But we went from 6% down to 1/8. So I got rid of all of it I could get rid of. However, it wasn't gone when I left office. So what I had to do, and we had to pay for getting rid of the grocery tax. And the way we did it was the last 1 7/8 that was on the books when I left office. We passed a law that said that's gone in 2018 when we quit paying DSEG money to Little Rock schools. When the state quit paying what we were paying to Little Rock schools under that court order, that extra money for desegregation, that was already scheduled to end per court order in 2018. So I convinced the legislature that when that ends in 2018, automatically that last 1 7/8 would come off. And it did. It did. So that law was passed in 2013 before I left office in 2014 or 2015, actually. And so it was already in place and automatically got rid of the rest of the grocery tax in 2018.
Good job. This is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Arkansas's retired Governor Mike Beebe and get some more behind-the-scenes stories of Arkansas politics. I want to remind everyone we're broadcasting live every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time on 101.1 The Answer. Also on Fridays, the show is rebroadcasted on KABF 88.3 at 2 p.m. And a podcast is made available on all popular listening sites and our YouTube channel. We'll be back. Okay, there's my big pause for your commercial, Tom. Tom's looking at me. Tom's like, give me a pause. That a big enough pause, Tom? Okay, good. All right, we're coming back. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy, and I'm speaking today with Arkansas's popular and pragmatic retired 45th Governor, Mike Beebe. Before the break, we talked about Governor Beebe's life growing up in, 4 states, 4 cities in Arkansas, 5 states. We talked about his going to school originally to be an FBI agent. I think it's really cool. And then he ended up an attorney in Searcy, Arkansas. Then we came back and talked about his Senate career, his Attorney General career, and his first term in office as governor. In your second term, Governor, you became the first Democratic governor since 1874 to face a Republican-controlled legislature in both houses. But this did not stop you from getting things done. One of your biggest achievements during your second term was you signed into law the private option, part of the Affordable Care Act, a.k.a. Obamacare. What does that mean, and why was it important?
Well, it meant a great deal for a lot of different constituencies. And there were a number of arguments that we used to get it done. And all were true, but different arguments were more appealing to different constituencies. For example, you had the obvious argument that 250,000 Arkansans were now going to be able to have health care. But that wasn't sufficient for a lot of folks because Arkansans in the General Assembly did not like Obamacare. And
why is that? Now, why did they not want to do that? What's the issue with not wanting to get 250 people insurance? Well,
Obamacare was unpopular because Obama was unpopular.
It's just that. Okay.
The Tea Party was big at the time, and so the Affordable Care Act had provisions in it that mandated certain requirements on insurance and that was unpopular with some people. But the truth of the matter was, it was more complicated than that in Arkansas because under our Constitution, we couldn't change this because it's constitutional. The people would have had to change it with constitutional amendment. It took 3/4 votes for this. 3/4 in both houses. That's 75 out of 100 in the House, 27 out of 35 in the Senate.
And you've got a Republican, House and Senate.
And Senate. And the fact of the matter is, you can't get 3/4 for motherhood and apple pie most. But there were plenty of other good reasons. First of all, the expansion of Medicaid, which we turned into the private option, but it was still the expansion of Medicaid, was the one thing the U.S. Supreme Court said was optional when Obamacare came in front of the Supreme Court. So states could take it or not take it. And most of the southern states, and certainly all the Republican states, said no, they weren't going to take it. Well, one of the arguments is, look, we're paying for this whether we take it or not. It's being paid for in a couple of ways. All our taxes are paying for part of it. And what the feds did was they said, if we're going to expand Medicaid so that you don't have more uninsured for hospitals, since hospitals are going to get more money because now they've got more people insured, we're going to cut Medicare reimbursements. Now, they're not cutting Medicare, but they're going to cut Medicare reimbursement rates for hospitals because now hospitals are going to get more insured so they don't have as many uninsured, so they don't need as much money in reimbursements for Medicare.
It's just borrowing from Paul to pay Peter, kind of.
Yeah, so whether we take it or not, we're going to pay for it. Our hospitals are going to pay for it. Our taxpayers are going to pay for it. And so one of my arguments was, do you want our taxpayers to be sending all this money to California and New York so that they can have more insureds and leave our people out? Well, that appealed to a lot of folks, obviously. I mean, that's just logic. Another argument was what it was going to do to our hospitals if we didn't take it. For example, I said to cut Medicare reimbursement rates. It was $58 million that first year just to UAMS alone in terms of losses if we didn't do the private option. The other thing was Obama needed a southern state, and no southern state was doing it. So we convinced them with the Republicans. Now I got to give people like Jonathan Dismang, Republican state senator from here in Searcy, who's turned out to be a wonderful state senator, incidentally. David Sanders, John Burris over in the House. They helped lead a contingent and helped formulate the private option where instead of just expanding Medicaid, we took the money and the requirements that would have been applicable under Medicaid and bought insurance with it. And it did a couple of things. Number one, it increased the number of insurance companies providing health care in Arkansas, creating more competition, which helped our rates. And in addition to that, it allowed us to be able to have a pool of money because we already had an insurance premium tax on the books. We didn't have to raise it. We didn't have to raise taxes. It was already there from years and years and years ago. So it created a pool of money with all this. By buying insurance instead of just straight Medicaid, it created a pool of money that allowed us to help defray the state's costs going forward without ever having to raise another dime in taxes because it created more tax money in an already existing tax on hospital insurance premiums. Hospitals were happy with it because they were going to get killed and it would have closed a lot of smaller hospitals and rural hospitals. But as I said, it would have cost UAMS $58 million, so even the big ones would have been severely strapped. And no telling how many people that would have lost their jobs, how many services would not have been available. So when you combine all of those arguments, don't send our tax money to California, don't close our hospitals, let's insure 250,000 additional Arkansans, let's get our share back of what we're already paying for. When you combine all those arguments, we were able to actually get 3/4.
Why would anybody not want to do that? I don't understand why anybody would not want to do that.
You still had some ideological opposition with Tea Party folks and extremely conservative Republicans that didn't want to go along.
What would be the alternative, though?
The alternative was there are states now that don't have it. Now, most Republican governors have awakened and they followed our lead. So now we have, 40-something states that do it. But you've still got 8 or 10 states that are doing the very Mississippi, I don't think has ever taken it. Alabama, I don't think has ever taken it.
So did people call you and ask you your opinion? That was a lot of moving parts that you just said. So did they call you up and ask you every one of those and you kind of taught everybody?
Yeah. The first one to call was Gary Herbert, the Republican governor of Utah, which is really strange. Utah's pretty conservative. And he said, how'd you do this? And so walked him through it. And so Utah ended up doing it. And I never will forget the Republican governor of Tennessee called. He couldn't get it done, but he tried. His legislature actually would not expand Medicaid. And I don't think Tennessee has expanded Medicaid to this day. But he certainly tried. Haltom was his name.
Why do people sometimes say that you didn't pass a lot of legislature in your name? Instead, you got it done by caring more about the greater good and kind of gave the credit away. It sounds to me like you did a lot of stuff in your name.
Well, yeah, when I was governor, that description was more applicable when I was in the Senate, where I often describe myself as more of the traffic cop, making sure that it all ran right and got passed. Because I did not file a lot of bills. I filed a lot of major ones, some constitutional amendments, and shepherded the school finance reform and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of sheer quantity of bills, sheer numbers, I didn't do a lot of that. But, you know, for the last 10 or 12 years I was in the Senate, I was running it. And it was more effective for me to help other people shepherd their stuff through or kill what needed to be killed. You know, some of the best work we ever did was to kill bad stuff, not just pass good stuff. And so that description of me not passing a lot of legislation in my name was probably applicable and appropriate, but it was for my time in the Senate. As governor, you have to go out there and put your stamp on more stuff. And so the description was applicable to the Senate time, not to the governor's time.
In your PBS documentary that I watched, and if anybody hasn't watched it, they need to go watch it. It's great. Well done. Representative Jay Bradford called you Atlanta. And when asked why, go ahead and tell our listeners why he called you Atlanta.
Well, Jay Bradford, when we were in the Senate, I guess in about 99 or 2000, somewhere along in there, he started calling me Atlanta, and the press asked him why he called me in Atlanta. And he said, because everything, he was referring to Delta Airlines, I think. He said, because everything has to go through Atlanta. And so that's how that name got there. Jay Bradford coined that. And he thought he was pretty clever.
He was. I like it. The PBS documentary was produced and directed by the husband and wife team, Catherine Tucker and Gabe Mahan. It's titled Let Beebe Be Beebe. Tell us the story behind that slogan.
Oh, yeah. Our dear recently departed last year friend, Matt DeCampo, who we stole when I was AG from KATV Channel 7. He was a reporter. And we brought him on as our press secretary in the Attorney General's office, and obviously took him with me to the governor's office. Well, when I'm running for governor in 2006, we had a series of mistakes. We had some weeks where early on in the campaign we'd made mistakes and got some bad press. I can't even remember what all the subject matter was, but it wasn't going the way you really wanted it to go. And Matt was a great press secretary who would have been terrible in the campaign, so I didn't take him with me to the campaign office. He stayed in the AG's office while I was running to help run for governor. So one afternoon, after a few weeks of this, he calls and he says, let's go have a beer at the Oyster Bar about 5 o'clock this afternoon. And I said, all right. And so I was a little bit down, and he said, look, you got all these people trying to handle you. You got folks telling you what you ought to say and how you ought to say it. And you don't need handlers. You just need to let Beebe be Beebe. Just be yourself was his advice. And from that point on, we never looked back. The mistakes went away. Everything got on a roll. And his advice about let Beebe be Beebe was
made you the most popular governor of Arkansas. I always think
he was right.
He was. I always think of the wives of politicians. Looking back, can you speak to your wife, Ginger's support, sacrifice, and strength?
Yeah, there's a great story behind this. A very funny story. You know, she's a great lady, but she never really was involved in politics. For example, since I never had an opponent, she didn't have to be. Okay. And as a state senator, there were occasions when she would be involved at some function, but they were pretty rare, and they weren't very difficult. And then when I ran for AG, I also didn't have an opponent. So she was busy at home raising kids and taking care of the house. Well, when I was elected AG, we bought a condominium in Little Rock. So I didn't have to drive back and forth every day to Searcy. I'd just come home on the weekends and stayed in Little Rock during the week. So fast forward, I'm elected governor. We don't need the condominium because we're going to move in the mansion. So we sold it. And so we're having a brunch the day before the inauguration. So this is like January 6th or 7th, something like that. And we're having a brunch for down in Trapnell Hall for all of the volunteers and campaign staff that worked so hard. And I get a phone call. Ginger's at the condominium packing up stuff because we need to get it out of there since we sold it. And so I get a call from, I think Stacy was the one to call. But at any rate, somebody's there with her helping her pack up, and I get this call at this brunch. Said, "You need to get over here right away." Ginger's in the floor crying. And I said, "Oh gosh." So the enormity of what was about to happen in changing her life as first lady had obviously hit her. So I jumped in the car, left Trapnell Hall, drove to the condominium, and looked at her, and I said, "Now, you've known this is coming." I said, "Why now? Why are you so upset?" And she looked at me and she said, "I didn't think you'd win." So, I mean.
Oh, the nice vote of confidence from your wife.
She'll bring you home.
Yeah, she will.
But, you're talking about being popular. She may be as popular as anybody's ever sat in that first lady's seat, because she opened that mansion up. She thought it was a people's house. She was caring and kind. And I never will forget, she did a listening tour for several months about children and foster children and children's services or lack thereof. And so they'd go around the state to different towns, Monticello or Magnolia or Jonesboro or lots of different places. And the first part would be including the media, so that they were publicizing the needs, and what was going on. And the second half of the day would be just parents, usually just mamas, talking about the problems that they were having, accessing services for their children. Usually it was very poor people. And so one day she came in and she said this African-American lady had said to her at the end of their discussion, said, "You are going to do something about this, aren't you?" And so she came back to the mansion that night. She said, she told me the story, and she said, "Now you are going to do something about this." So the next morning I called the head of, John Seelig, the head of Human Services, and I said, "You are going to do something about this, aren't you?" So, there are a lot of those little anecdotes, but she ended up being extraordinarily popular. And, she always had class and grace.
Yeah, she really does.
Way beyond what I could understand.
So this is another great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Arkansas's retired Governor Mike Beebe, attorney at law, who also served 20 years in the Arkansas Senate and 4 years as Attorney General. We'll be right back. Pause. All right, we're almost through, Governor. Tell Ginger that I said, this is off script, tell Ginger I said hi and that I miss seeing her at church.
I will do.
Hey, did you?
She's our senior warden here now.
What do you mean? Oh, at your church?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Did you know?
In the Episcopal Church, the senior warden is like the chairman of the board of deacons in a Baptist church or something. But, I broke I didn't. Our Father Gary broke every canon of the Episcopal Church because he kept me on for 25 years as senior warden. You're supposed to only be 3 years. So 3 years, and then you're supposed to change it. But I ended up being senior warden for 25 years. And so we get back home, and they ask her to be senior warden. So she's really involved now.
That's a big job. That's a really big job. Also, did you know that Ed Lytle, that my sister is Kristen Lytle, married to Bernie Lytle? Do you remember that? You did know that once, but Ginger knows it. But did you realize that?
I'd forgotten it.
I'd
forgotten it.
Mm-hmm. I know. When you start talking about Ed Lytle, I was like, oh yeah, Ed Lytle. That's Bernie's uncle, I think.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to get back in there. All right. We're coming back. Okay. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Arkansas's retired Governor Mike Beebe, who served between 2007 and 2015. Earlier in the show, we talked about his life as a child. We talked about his life as a senator. We talked about his life as Attorney General, first-term governor, second-term governor. Governor Beebe, your approval rating never slipped below 70% in all your years as governor. Your crossover appeal had to make you a much talked about candidate for the presidential elections. Did you consider it?
No, and I never considered a Senate race. The progression had always been Congress, governor, Senate, and there was some pressure for me to run for the Senate. In fact, there was a poll that I think U of A did that came out like in October. Before I left office, that had me with a 14-point lead over the incumbent senator. But I never had a desire to go to Washington. I did when I was young, didn't know any better, but it had gotten so poisonous up there. I don't know that there was a better job politically in the world than being governor. And so I was ready to come home. I was ready to relax a little bit, and so I never considered that. Interestingly enough, I don't know where these people come up with this stuff, but there's a deal on YouTube that somebody had put on there. I've never been able to figure out who it was. It's well done. It looks like a real Fox News election night, because they advertise Fox News, but it could have been any network election night with me and Trump in 2020. And they go through each state. And it's pretty realistic how the polls have now closed in state X and state Y. And
we'll have to go look for that.
Yeah, well, it's if you went to YouTube and you hit my name, then there's 50 jillion entries, but one of them is me and Trump. And you walk through it, and it's like a real election night.
Funny. So what do you think about politics today? You were right about it. It's gotten to be dirty politics.
It's sad. It's sad that we've gotten so polarized. And I'm talking about both parties, the extreme left and the extreme right. And part of it's the legislature's fault, and not just Arkansas legislature, the entire country's, all 50 state legislatures. And the reason I say that is what happens with the decennial census every 10 years when we do a census, then congressional House districts are redistricted, but they're redistricted by the state legislatures. So, for example, Arkansas state legislature redistricts our congressional boundary lines. And what these legislatures have done across this country is created real safe Democratic seats and real safe Republican seats, so that there's not much in the middle. So that when these people are running for the House, they're in Washington, they're not worried about the November election. There's either going to be a Republican because it's a Republican skewed district, or they're going to be a Democrat because it's a Democratic skewed district. So when they're running, they're afraid of their own people in their own primary. So Republicans run farther to the right, the Democrats run farther to the left, and when they get elected, there has not been anything in the middle. There's not been any desire to run toward the middle, and so there's no way to want to cross over and work with the other party, and it's polarized to the point that they don't even talk to each other. They don't like each other. They don't get along with each other.
You think the pendulum will swing back the old way?
Ultimately, the beauty of this country is people are boss, and when they get fed up enough, they'll fix it. When they get tired enough of this extreme partisanship, they'll start voting for folks that don't exhibit that extreme partisanship. Ultimately, it'll swing back. I don't know when, but I'm an eternal optimist, and I have faith in the American electorate. I have faith in the American people, and I think ultimately, when they get peed off enough about it, they'll demand change.
Last question. Now that you're no longer running for office, we can talk candidly about anything, I think. I read where you said you'd done more than 700 pardons of mostly nonviolent offenders. And thank goodness in 2014, you pardoned your son from a 2003 felony drug possession conviction. Your son did 9 years, I think, for marijuana that is now legal. And I imagine you learned a lot during that time.
Yeah, he did. He got more punishment than he would have gotten if he'd not been my son.
Yes.
Now they didn't send him to jail or to prison because they weren't sending first offender marijuana folks, but they put him on probation for 3 years or something like that. And then I had granted all those. I rarely granted commutations. Very rare, shortening people's sentence. But I was real liberal about granting pardons for folks that had already completed their sentence or their probation and paid their fines and whatever they're supposed to do, if some period of time had elapsed and they hadn't reoffended, because particularly nonviolent and particularly young people that were convicted of drugs, because I thought they deserve a second chance. And so I'm now faced with a lot of criticism for doing that for my son when I did it for everybody else. Why would I treat him worse? I can understand not treating him better. People wouldn't like that.
Well, your wife would, but then you have problems at home if you don't treat him better.
Yeah, well, that's true too. But he deserved what everybody else deserved.
That's right.
And a lot of people raised Cain about it, but I wasn't going to treat him worse than everybody else. And one of the most heart-wrenching things that happened to me was a lady drove 100 miles at an event one night where I was speaking out in the open in the cold when Arkadelphia had done their scholarship deal, much like El Dorado had done. And it was so big, so many people there, they had to do it outside on the football field. And it was cold winter time, and I already had a cold. And of course, everybody had to speak, and I'm the last to speak. And so I'm ready to get back to the car. And so I'm walking back to the car, and this lady's wrapped up, and she'd been standing there throughout that cold, young woman. And she said she drove 100 miles to thank me for her husband, who couldn't get off work. He was working, supporting a family, but wanted to thank me for his pardon. That you never forget that.
That just almost brings tears to my eyes. That's a wonderful story. Has it been hard to let go?
No, it's been hard to let go of the people. I love the job. I don't remember bad days. I'm sure I had bad days. You remember mostly the good days, but I don't miss all that. But what I do miss, and what is hard to let go, are the huge number of people, not just your staff, not just the troopers who become part of your family, but the friends, the supporters, the folks that you used to see once or twice a week or three or four times a month. Now you may not even see them all year. That's what I miss.
And you don't get to solve problems. It's the solving problems part that's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was in the Senate, the most enjoyable time I had was constituency work, when you knocked a wall down to get somebody something they deserve. Now, about half the time people were asking for stuff they didn't deserve. And you have to be able to winnow those out, people asking for stuff that was ridiculous or that wasn't appropriate. But about half the time they were folks that were just caught up in a system that nobody was listening to them. And, being able to pick the phone up and call an agency head or call a department or call somebody and get relief for somebody that truly deserved it was probably the most rewarding part of being a senator. And
working together in groups to solve problems and to get things done is just so gratifying. I think if I ever quit working, that's the part I would miss the most.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The gratification you get from being able to solve a problem is pretty special.
Thank you, Governor, for all your service.
It's my pleasure.
For all you've done for all of us, for being smart, figuring out all that Medicare, Medicaid, Affordable Care Act. That was complex.
No kidding.
That was good, though. That was really, really good. Thanks for being a great example.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. In closing, to all, thank you for spending time with us. We hope you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring or enlightening, and that it, whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the picture of Kerry's face in the center of the screen. For more of Kerry's interviews, click either video on the right of the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.